Good afternoon, Year 7 and 8, and welcome back to Haverstock Drama. We've got an exciting video this week looking at the tragedy, the tragic hero, and how they fall from grace. I have specifically written and created this work so that anybody can do it. Even if you haven't got a computer, but you've only got a mobile phone, you can do this, okay? Because I know some of you have had trouble in the past trying to submit work if you couldn't open up a PowerPoint or Word document. So we've taken on board your feedback, and now this task is going to be a lot more simple for you to watch, and I'm going to explain all of it in this video, as well as teaching you a few things about theatre. So let's get started. So where did theatre start? Well, if you're in year 8, you know that we looked at the idea that thousands of years ago, before there was shops, hospitals, anything, the earliest type of human being would still do rituals, which would involve dancing and performing. And that is acting, that is performing, but the first type of actual theatre came in ancient Greece, okay? So almost every Greek city had a theatre. Plays were a big thing in ancient Greece, and they were part of a festival called the Theatre Festival of Dionysus. And that was a long event where they would drink, they would perform, they would celebrate to a god. The Greeks enjoyed singing and dancing as part of this festival. At first, theatres were only used for this. And their theatres, which is what I keep saying, is called an amphitheatre. That's what you can see right here, okay? This massive outdoor theatre. The stage is by there. And these could hold over 18,000 people. That's the same as 18 Haverstocks. Imagine how noisy a year 8 assembly is at Haverstock right now. And imagine having, so that's what, 120 people. Imagine having 17,500 more people. Now you can imagine keeping the audience's attention would be challenging. So who were the actors in these plays? Well, this is obviously not a picture from then. Believe it or not, they did not have cameras 2,500 years ago, but their actors were all men. They wore large masks like this, so that the audience right at the back could see all of their facial expressions and emotions. You can see the holes in the masks here. Now they almost worked like a microphone, and they'd amplify their voices so that the people right at the back, the 18,000 people right at the back, could hear exactly what was going on. Now there was 2 types of plays they'd perform. The first is a comedy, usually about current events, making fun of politicians, things like that, very much like what we have now. Actors wore bright colours for these. The second type of Greek play was a tragedy. It was all about the past. And as you can imagine, it was very sad. Actors wore dark colours for these. Plays were spoken or they were sung in rhyme. They often weren't even acted. Quite often it was a group of people, like these, called a chorus, who would tell the story to the audience. But remember, this was the first time anyone had seen anything like this, so even that was exciting. Most Greek people couldn't read or write, so they didn't know stories. So being told them by people on stage in bright colours and masks was very exciting. So we're going to look today at a Greek tragedy. That's a picture of a Greek tragedy mask. As you can see, he looks very, very sad. He's got exaggerated sad features and a massive beard so that people at the back could see clearly, oh, he is a sad character. So they were really popular Greek tragedies. They're really the first type of play that we have. And that's popular from like the late 16th century BC. That's over 2,600 years ago. That is a long, long time ago. Even I am only 27 years old. So no jokes, please, about that being when Miss Venn was born. So we had the Greek tragedy first. Then that led to Greek comedies. And together, these genres adapted and changed, and they form the foundation upon which all modern theatre and storytelling is based. When you watch the video in a minute, you're going to see that all modern stories, films and TV are still based on this. We can still find the elements of a Greek tragedy in that theatre, that original theatre from 2,500 years ago. Okay, so I'm going to do task 1 with you now. We're going to watch a video. It's about 5 minutes. And I want you to think about the following things. Can you figure these things out? So number 1, what are the 3 parts of a Greek tragedy? Number 2, what modern stories does he compare a Greek tragedy to? And number 3, how did the audience feel when they watched a Greek tragedy? Afterwards, I'm going to clarify and explain some words, so don't worry if there's some words you find confusing. If you want to, you could even pause the video, go into Google and type out the word and see what it means. Okay, so we're going to go to the video now.
The story goes something like this. A royal, rich, or righteous individual, who otherwise happens to be a lot like us, makes a mistake that sends his life and the lives of those around him spiraling into ruin. Sound familiar? This is the classic story pattern for Greek tragedy. For thousands of years, we've spun spellbinding tales that fit this pattern, and modern storytellers around the world continue to do so. 3 critical story components, influenced by Aristotle's Poetics, help us understand the allure. First, the tragic hero should be elevated in rank and ability, but also relatable. Perhaps he is a king, or extraordinary in some other way. But because you and I are neither unusually good nor unusually bad, neither is the hero. And he has one particular tragic flaw, or hamartia, something like ambition, tyranny, stubbornness, or excess pride that causes him to make a critical mistake. And from that mistake comes disaster and downfall. As an example of these elements in action, let's look to Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, about a man who doesn't know he was adopted and is warned by an oracle that he's destined to murder his father and marry his mother. In trying to escape this fate, he kills a man who won't get out of his way at a crossroad. He then cleverly answers the riddle of the monstrous Sphinx, freeing the kingdom of Thebes from a plague. He marries the widowed queen and becomes king. But after he finds out that the murdered man was his father, and the queen he married is his mother, Oedipus gouges out his eyes and retreats into the wilderness. At the beginning of his story, Oedipus is elevated in ability, and he's elevated in rank. He's neither unusually evil nor saintly. He's relatable. Notice the height of the fall. Once a king, but now homeless and blind. It's more tragic, after all, if a king falls from a tall throne than if a jester falls off his stepstool. Oedipus's tragic flaw is hubris, or excessive pride, and it causes him to attempt to avoid the fate prophesied for him, which is exactly what makes it happen. He's a particularly unlucky soul, because his mistake of killing his father and marrying his mother is done in complete ignorance. Of course, these narrative principles transcend classic Greek tragedy. In Shakespeare's canon, we see Hamlet's indecisiveness lead to a series of bad decisions, or perhaps non-decisions, that culminate in the death of almost every character in the play. And Macbeth's ambition catapults him to the top before sending him careening to his grave. Even modern pop culture staples like Game of Thrones and The Dark Knight resonate with the tropes Aristotle identified over 2,000 years ago. So what's the point of all of this suffering? According to Aristotle, and many scholars since, a good tragedy can evoke fear and pity in the audience. Fear of falling victim to the same or similar catastrophe, and pity for the height of the hero's downfall. Ideally, after watching these tragic events unfold, we experience catharsis, a feeling of relief and emotional purification. Not everyone agrees why this happens. It may be that empathizing with the hero allows us to experience and release strong emotions that we keep bottled up. Or maybe it just lets us forget about our own problems for a little while. But regardless of how you feel when you watch Poor Oedipus, never has there been a more salient reminder that no matter how bad things get, at least you didn't kill your father and marry your mother.
Okie dokie, well done for following along with that. I think there's a lot to be learnt from that, isn't there? Some really interesting stories. And we're going to look at how that connects to stories, modern stories that we know. So, a few words you might need clarifying. He talks about the three components of a tragedy. And what he means by that is almost like he's saying the three parts of it, the three bits of it. So a component is a small part that makes up a whole thing. So when you add together the three different components of a Greek tragedy, you get one whole story. He then said hubris, which I'm not going to lie, is a word I had to go Google after this because I didn't know what it meant. What it actually means, if someone is showing hubris, they're being really self-confident, arrogant. I put in there in brackets, you might even say they're being full of themselves. He says that the audience feel catharsis. That is a process of releasing and getting relief from strong or repressed emotions. It's the same thing, I guess, as if you're feeling upset, and I do this sometimes. I might watch, for example, there's an episode of Grey's Anatomy that makes me cry. There's a song that I know I can put on and I'll cry. But after that, I feel better. So if you're struggling, you've got a really rubbish time in your life, but you go and you watch a tragedy and you see something awful happen to someone, watching that and seeing those emotions and feeling those emotions can then give you relief and make you feel better. And lastly, again, another word I had no idea what it meant was hamartia. But that's a fatal flaw that someone has, particularly the hero. That might be arrogance. It might be that they've got a soft spot for their girlfriend. It might be that they don't listen to other people. But that flaw, that hamartia, leads to their downfall. Remember, downfall is losing their power and possibly their life. So task 2, you're going to go on to the other piece of homework that I set. So I set you 2 today. One had this video and the tasks explained. The second was a quiz. Now that quiz is based on that video. And it is not an easy quiz. I've not given you one obvious answer and 3 joke answers. You actually have to think. So if you're struggling, you come back to this video and you watch it again. It's only 4 minutes. Don't forget you can try 3 times to get the questions right. Okay? So what you might want to do right now is pause this video, go over, try the quiz, and then come back once you've done that and press play and watch the rest of the video. Because I'm just going to explain your last 2 tasks. So your last 1 task, sorry. So, picking the components of a modern tragedy is task 3. I want you to think of a modern film, a TV show, a book, a comic book, something that you know, that you think is a tragedy. I'll give you some examples in a minute, but there's actually most stories we can find a tragic hero in. And I want you to try and break it down into the 3 key components of a tragic hero's story. And you're going to write your answers in the box later. So, I'm going to give you my example. With the 3 components. They're also written down on the homework so that you can see them. So, component 1, the hero is powerful and he is high in rank. That means he's got a high position of power. But he's not perfect and, we can kind of relate to him. I recognise him. I feel like I could know that person. So I've gone for Tony Stark. For those of you that don't follow and somehow haven't seen the Marvel films, he is Iron Man. So, he's incredibly rich. He owns a special equipment, the Iron Man suit, that nobody else does, so he's powerful. But he has flaws. He's really quite funny. He makes mistakes, and for that reason, we like him. We relate to him. We want to watch him in the film. Component 2, though, is where that hero has a weakness, hamartia, and that causes him to make a big mistake. Now, for those of you that are massive Marvel fans, please don't comment about how this is across several Marvel films. It is. This is Iron Man's story throughout the whole MCU. But I've broken it down into 3 components. So I'm going to take his flaw as being his arrogance and his cockiness. Okay, he does think he's better than anyone else. Sometimes it's funny, but in this case, it gets him into a really bad situation. He also struggles with the death of his parents when he was younger in a car crash, and that kind of haunts him. And the mistake he makes is that he's so arrogant and he needs control that during an argument, he ends up breaking up the Avengers, so they're no longer together as a team to save the planet. And that leads us to component 3. The hero meets his downfall and loses his power. FYI, if you have not seen Endgame, and for some reason you are still wanting to see it and don't know the end, don't watch the next minute of this video, but it has been out for well over a year, so I think I'm allowed to spoil it now. So, component 3. Because of him breaking up the Avengers, they aren't together to fight Thanos when he first comes in and is a real danger to Earth. Eventually he gets them together, he realises his mistake, but it's too little too late. And although they manage to defeat Thanos and save people, Tony Stark ends up dying. He loses his life. And that is all caused from his hamartia, from his weakness, which is his arrogance and need for control. So we see him go from one of the most powerful men in the world, rich, famous, got amazing company and equipment with his Iron Man suits and weapons, and then by the end that doesn't matter because that doesn't save him because of his overall mistake. Okay, so that's a tragic hero story. It's a classic one. So going back, your task is to pick one and to do what I've just done, break it down. Only has to be a sentence or two for each one. And if you can't think of any examples, if it's just too big a task, I've got some for you here. So I'm happy for you to just break down the 3 components into this. So you might want to talk about Spider-Man. He's a tragic hero. Batman, especially, in particular Batman from the Dark Knight films, as they said in the video. Deadpool. Oh, it's a classic, ultimate tragic hero. Romeo and Juliet. You might see some from TV shows you know now. Maybe there's someone from You or from Stranger Things or from Riverdale. But I want you to pick one character. You're going to break it into 3 components and tell me their story. Once you've done that, you can submit this in 2 ways, okay? So number 1, you can handwrite this. You can take a picture of your 3 components. Only needs to be a sentence for each, so not even half a page of writing. And then you can just post it on Show My Homework, like lots of you have done before. Or you can do the second way, which is where you can go into Show My Homework. On this homework, you can comment, give me your message and your answer from that, and just send it directly there. Okay, so the only way I'm going to say that you've done this and I'm going to submit it is if I get it either a picture of your work or a comment of your work. As usual, Year 7 and 8, if you have any questions, message me. Please don't message me on Friday. Message me today or tomorrow, and I'll get back to you with an answer before the next day, hopefully. The only thing that's left for me to say is have